Be sure to check out MythVisionPodcast.com. Help MythVision grow, guys. Become a Patreon member. You guys will get early access to all of my videos when I'm done editing them. Also, it's a small community where you guys can message me your questions and talk to me in private. You guys can donate also through PayPal. Join our social media links down in the description. We have Twitter and Facebook groups. Help the community of MythVision grow. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Hit that bell button so you're notified every time I do a live video and you don't miss any of my content. Like this video and comment your thoughts below because I want to know what you think about all of these things.
We are MythVision. Welcome back to MythVision Podcast. Your host, Derek Lambert. Thanks for tuning in. If you're new, make sure you guys hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, check the bell. That way you're notified every time I drop a bomb. And I have an interesting guest again joining me, Bernie Taylor. He's an independent naturalist and author whose research explores the mythological connections and biological knowledge among prehistoric, indigenous, and ancient peoples. His work in these areas include Biological Time, Before Orion, Finding the Face of the Hero, 2017. Before Orion is premised on Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey monomyth that is the core of stories worldwide among indigenous peoples, the ancients, and our modern society. Before Orion explores the deeper root for this monomyth by looking at how hunter-gatherers viewed themselves within the natural and spiritual worlds through Paleolithic carve art from 40,000 years ago. Taylor proposes that select cave paintings are fundamental pieces in human journey to self-realization, the foundation of written language, and a record of biological knowledge that irrevocably impacted some of the artistic styles, religious practices, and stories that are still with us today. Make sure you guys go down in the description. You can help MythVision Podcast out if you guys want to help us grow, as well as help Bernie out. Get his book, check out his material, join his social media programs, and check all that out. With that being said, Bernie, welcome to MythVision, man. Thanks for joining me, sir.
Well, Derek, thanks for having me back on. It's been about a year.
It has been about a year. We got to make this more frequent than that.
And a lot's happened since then.
Yes, sir. A lot has happened since then. And I know with our first show, we had a lot of people who were just like me. I'm like, okay, wow, this is really interesting. Did they write? Did they draw? Did they not only draw, but carve into stone these images of creatures that kind of take you through the internal mythology of humanity, if you will, and also an astrological connection. But today I figured you were going to take us into something different. I don't know. Are we still doing heaven and hell?
We can do heaven and hell. We can mix it in with some angels. I wrote a piece for the Free Thought Society, it's not a news magazine sort of thing. And you can go to look, people can look up the Free Thought Society online in their November edition. And I'm not like an active member of the Free Thought Society, but the basic concept is a mix of atheists, secular humanists who don't want prayer in schools. Okay, and people give their testimonies and so forth. And I approach them with a different idea for their newsletter, not about the testimony of why I don't believe in God and how I got sucked into some evangelical movement, but more of why do we believe in God? Why do people believe in God? Because half the people in the world believe there's a divine force, the other half doesn't. Are either side, is one side or the other crazy, or are we all crazy? And so to pitch that one to atheists and secular humanists, it's like, hey, no, we know the other side is crazy. So I've talked about this and how did we come to the idea of God? Right. Or how can we disprove God is actually a better idea. How can we disprove God? And separately, we can also talk about where did heaven and hell come from, which is also in the same sphere of influence. So these are questions that, people's hairs are already being raised in your audience. I get it. And that's okay. Because if we learn where we came from, we can better debate the other side, where that side is. And we can also look inside ourselves to see, what do we believe that the other side thinks is crazy? It may very well be. So are we ready to walk down this path through the gates of hell?
Dude, I've been to hell and back a couple times.
That's right. So. You've been there. I heard you told me the story. That's right. So the kind of to start with is very few people have actually said, or actually the prophets said that they directly spoke with God. Okay. It's actually quite rare in the scriptures. they speak through an angel. Most commonly speak through an angel. Would that be Muhammad and Mary, who was told by Gabriel that Jesus would give to her in the virgin birth? Abraham, Daniel, I mean, the whole host of them listen to angels, not directly to the voice of God. And the angels became that intermediary. Okay. And this is a tradition we find around the world. Of people who are hearing voices from maybe an angel. Another word might be an avianoid, a birdman, because these are typically male characters. And if we can disprove that there are in fact angels, if we can disprove that, we can say, I mean, almost definitively, that what was said from the alleged great Almighty through these angels to man is more mortal than divine. Does that make sense?
I'm catching the logic for sure. Yes.
So if you can disprove the messenger, you can show that it's a myth versus fact.
I agree.
And that's the direction. So we can go around the world, and we can go back in time. We can go tens of thousands of years back in time, and we can find these angel characters on cave walls. And what they are, it's very clear what they are, is they're people who are dressed up in costumes, okay? And they typically raptors, okay? So the raptors are high-flying birds. Raptors also eat the dead, okay? And so it's a way of getting rid of the corpse, as well as taking that corpse to another place, a higher, loftier place. And so it's a pretty important concept that there are birds, there are bird people tens of thousands of years ago that had this ability. And I'm going to pull up one right now, and here we go. And you're going to share my screen, and you don't see all my hate mail, right? Okay, good. That's important. Okay, so you can see you can now see this cosmic man, correct?
I do not see your screen. I'm sorry. I was
okay.
muted.
Share. So I'm doing a share screen.
Uh-huh.
And it's on share screen.
Yes, sir.
If I hit share screen,
it should choose what you're trying to share.
Okay.
Once you hit so it pops up a menu, and you should be able to.
Okay, actually, let me do that. Yeah, share screen. There we go. Okay, I pushed that to the side. Maximize. Side-by-side mode. I'm in enable remote control of all applications. Maximize zoom and share screen. Well, that's not working. And so that's, we're in the share screen, and maximize zoom window with particular Windows share screens. Scale to fit share screen window. Take the enable remote control of all applications, side-by-side mode, and I just took all those out. Okay, so we're gonna skip the videos. But what we do have going back tens of thousands of years ago is we have these shamanic characters. And the shamanic characters have a mask, and it's very clear that they have a mask on. So this isn't a matter of interpretation, because you can see an eye through the mask. You can see the chins that drop below the mask. In fact, in one case, he actually takes the mask on and off. It shows both. And so these angelic characters are truly people that are wearing masks that go on through their transformative journey. In Siberia, back in about 1900 and to today, we have records from anthropologists who studied these shamanic characters. And you would have a shaman go into a dance, and in his dance, he transforms their horse and birds, and the bird is most often a raptor and an eagle prominent among them. And he goes to the land of the dead. Okay, so this all ties together. He goes to the land of dead, and he goes to ask for assistance. Do you know who he goes to ask for assistance to in the land of the dead?
Who?
The sea shaman. He goes to ask the sea shaman. He doesn't go, the equivalent of the prophets. So he goes to his equivalent of, Jesus, Mary, Joseph, and Abraham, and Daniel, and the rest of them. he goes to ask the dead shaman, because they have the power to give him their insight about who they should, how to help their current people. So there is no divine, singular divine being, the great Almighty, the God. And it's a great mystery, you could say that, but clearly there is no God in the shamanic tradition. That shamanic tradition in Siberia is identical to cave images from tens of thousands of years ago, because they're the same people.
You know, Bernie, this is interesting you say this, because I don't know why I'm thinking of the Witch and Wind of Endor, and the bringing up of Samuel, the prophet, his spirit or his ghost. He needs to know if he's going to win the war that day. Notice he doesn't call upon Yahweh. He doesn't ask God. He goes to a witch to pull up the spirit of a prophet to find out if he's going to, you know, so it's just wild. Like, why didn't you just go to the big man upstairs the whole time? Anyway.
Exactly, because the tradition that the ancient Israelites drew upon was shamanic in nature. They didn't invent it. They're drawing on traditions that went so far back in time, tens of thousands of years, that we can now see. And so when we find the angel, how would you describe the angel, when in all the images that you see him?
Sorry, I gotta fly.
That's like Mike Pence did that one, yeah.
I know, that's what I'm trying to prevent. I don't want to go down in history with that. So when it comes to angels, what do I think? I mean, they're winged creatures, the seraphim with 6 wings. I mean, what else flies that has wings other than birds? So I get the logic of why they would be winged figures, if you will, that can fly. It makes sense.
So they're winged. They're winged in the Abrahamic tradition. They tend to have human faces. Okay. But if you go around the world, the same and throughout time, those same characters often have a mask or an actual raptor face. So Horus of the Egyptian tradition, can you describe him?
Beaked-faced God.
Man.
Yeah.
Who is the intermediary between the Pharaoh and the one God, the great Almighty. Okay. Same tradition. Have you ever done yoga?
Couple sessions before.
Oh, okay. So Garuda-san is the eagle pose that you went into. And you went into many poses, down dog, you went to lion, you did snake pose, you did a whole bunch of ones. And in the yoga tradition, you are asking and receiving assistance from those animals. Okay. And you go into Garuda-san. Garuda-san, you become the eagle, the angelic character. So you've done it. I mean, you've been there. So you are just as crazy as anybody else on the other side.
Right.
Because you've done it, okay? Have you ever done the chicken dance in Oktoberfest?
No, I have not.
Well, I bet half of your guests have, okay? I mean, when you watched Harry Potter, did you think that the owl was actually bringing the message to Harry Potter at the beginning of the movie?
I mean,
You believed it.
I can't remember exactly. I mean,
you bought into the story, okay? You bought into the story.
Yeah. It's a great story, though. Yeah.
It's a great story.
Like it? Who doesn't like that story? Right.
But it starts off with the owl raptor messenger bringing Harry the letter to take him back to Hogsworth. Okay?
Right.
So we buy these stories. And back to the yoga tradition, at the end of yoga, do you remember what you did? The last thing you did at the very, very end.
I don't.
You laid flat. You can't forget that one.
Okay.
You went to Shavasana. Shavasana is the corpse pose. By the way, your listeners right now like screaming, Derek, you need to go back to yoga. It's the corpse pose. You go to the land of the dead after you've had assistance from all these animals in the same way as the shamanic tradition in Siberia. It's the same route. Okay. And in the Paleolithic tradition, we have the characters, the hero, he travels around the board and through time and space, and he overlaps with animals. He overlaps with a dolphin to become a merman. He overlaps with, of course, the raptor to become the avianoid, the horse to become a centaur, and all these mythic characters that we have in the record. So what's happening is that we today, I mean, you know, the strip mall yogi, okay, is doing the exact same thing as the shamanic practitioners in Siberia, as did people tens of thousands of years ago in the Upper Paleolithic. And so it's the same tradition. There were nuances in that tradition in the Abrahamic tradition. Okay, they took off the mask of the raptor, and allegedly it was, as we have it in art today, we have a human faced with an angel with wings, who is still that messenger. It's the same character. And this is the one I'm going to put out there for Native Americans. This is in no way a pointed at indigenous traditions. And this is in no way appearing to be discriminatory in every way. Anyway, but in the Native American traditions, we have people who dress up as birds. Okay, it's a thing. It is. And the powwow is a dance competition. Okay, and in the powwow and previous Native American traditions, people dress up as birds to transform. Okay, in older times, before we had weathermen, Native Americans had a rain dance, and the spiritual leader adorned his wings to then speak to the great mystery. Okay, that's a shamanic tradition. It's the exact same shamanic tradition as people in Siberia that were going to the actually similar, such that they, in the Native American tradition, they were speaking to the great mystery as opposed to a previous shaman, whereas in the Siberian tradition, they spoke to dead shaman. Okay, but still both the great mystery. Okay. So we have this on multiple continents. We have it for tens of thousands of years back in time. And we can ask the question, if some people are speaking to a great almighty, and they are most recently in the last 4,000 years, and other people around the world are not speaking to a great almighty, and people tens of thousands of years ago were not speaking to a great almighty, they were transforming to the great mystery of sorts. Are angels a new introduction, or are they something has always existed?
That's interesting, because what you bring up makes me think of animism. I mean,
Yes.
we a lot of people believe that primitive religious type of human traditions were animistic. And they're definitely incorporating nature worship. Animals are part of that, which makes me think that the yoga we do today is really just a modern conception of animism. Yeah. It's a modern.
You're darn right it is. And it's okay.
Right.
It's okay. It's no different than the chicken dance. It's no different than watching Swan Lake and interpreting the human characters to be birds. There's no difference between them. That is the essence of what makes us human.
Right.
It's who we are. If we can't do that, we're no different than chimps.
Right. And I definitely would say, if you will, tongue in cheek here, that what we're not suggesting is that there's like a literal spiritualistic, in the literal sense, necessity involved in these actions. If you're doing these things, these are just great practices that we've always done that have been healthy and good for us, into our nature, something we've always practiced. But it doesn't mean that you literally have to believe in a fundamentalist approach on these type of things. There are Buddhists, for example, that are atheist, yet they are tapping into what they believe to be the human consciousness, how to try and be selfless, a better human, things like that. So I point that out for people who might be watching, who are already going, is this going to be a program of spirituality, or what is he trying to get at? Well, there's a reason why people believe these things. And are they crazy or not? And I like what you're doing here. I mean, I'm not against people who have beliefs in things. I personally am a naturalist, and I think that almost anything, if we don't know right now, we might know a natural explanation in the future, because everything prior to that we've had explanations for. That's just my opinion. I'm definitely looking for a natural explanation to all.
Absolutely. And when I'm using shamanism and animism interchangeably. So animism is the one root of shamanism. Okay. And so absolutely. Have you ever said somebody is as strong as an ox, smart as an owl, or eats like a pig?
Yes.
You have projected animism.
Right.
Okay. And so it's in our nature that we imitate animals to give us strength, to give us meaning. The metaphors. And we can't escape from this. And so by the way, pigs don't eat like pigs. Okay. People have pigs walking around the houses. They're actually quite intelligent animals. I don't have one, but it's a thing. Okay. They're like dogs. Right. Okay. And owls really aren't smart. And I'm not really sure if oxes are actually strong. They're just big. But it is who we are to project and gain strength from the animals, whether it be yoga, whether it be, on a sports field or in, intellectual society. And it's absurd. It's crazy. It is absolutely nuts that we believe that. And that nuttiness is no different than someone saying they've heard from an angel and the angel told them to do this or that. There really is no difference. On Carl Jung, I'm not a Jungian per se, but I'm a strong follower of Jung. Okay, he's a brilliant man, absolutely brilliant man. And most people in the audience, if you're not familiar with Jung, you've been exposed to Jung through Myers-Briggs tests. Jung developed the concepts of introvert, extrovert, thinker, feeler, and we use those in our common vernacular. It is mainstream science today. Okay, Jung did a lot of other stuff, and when you talk about the collective unconscious, or personal unconscious, that is Jung. That is his work. We can go for hours of ideas that Jung brought forward to the popular consciousness. And some of these ideas were in ancient Hinduism and so on, but he brought it forth to the popular consciousness. Now, Jung, where did he get it all from? Well, a few things. One is he took that journey. Okay, he went to literally the land of the dead. He had a moment that many of us have had, and people who have had that moment because they have a look about them that they've been there. Okay, it's a thing, and you have that look, and many other people have that look. Now, Jung also had a helper. Okay, and his helper was called Philemon. You want to guess what Philemon looked like?
A bird.
You're darn right. He was his angel. And Jung's The Red Book, he draws out who Philemon is. Okay. So Jung had a personal angel that he truly believed. This isn't just, casual joke. He truly believed that he was conversation with that angel. Okay.
Right.
Well, what he was really doing was he was having a conversation with himself.
Right. I was hoping we were going to get somewhere because, to be honest with you, all right. So here, let me pause and go back.
So this is modern psychology, right? This is a guy talking to an angel that you today are using his stuff.
Okay, I have to say something here, Bernie, for those who are already going, hold on. And I had this criticism I already wanted to bring up. Sure. You're telling me guys talking to angels, right? Having this spiritual, invisible, like my sister-in-law or me, that in the past when I was a fundamentalist Christian was talking to God, that I really was actually talking to God, right? Let me pause because I want to say that that's not necessarily what you're saying. And so I started having a skepticism because you're like, that's the same thing as if you say you eat like a pig or you're doing yoga or something. And I'm like, hold on, I don't know if those are the same things. But with what you're suggesting, I must say, as someone who was getting off heroin, because I was a drug addict, very, very intensely addicted to heroin, I was shooting up. When I went to get clean, I cried. Like I literally in tears cried. I knew I was going to die. And I said to myself, but I was praying, if you will. And I looked back and realized that the whole time it was me talking to me. But I was trying to think it was this divine God and realized now, whoa, I was really talking to myself. Now, whatever that did, it helped me achieve what I needed to necessary to survive. I say that to say, even if you're a strict atheist naturalist watching this, okay, consider that psychologically, there's some stuff here that is important. If you're someone who's open-minded and you say, well, maybe there is stuff going on that I'm not aware of. Cool. This is right in your alley. You wouldn't have a problem with this. But if you are an atheist, still don't close off to this. I'm telling you, psychologically, this can be true in a subjective reality to your own psyche, if you will. Your own mind has such power and ability to make you think things that I'm okay with entertaining these ideas. This is what makes us human. You don't have to be such a strict naturalist, atheistic person that there's no psychological things that you can tap into to help yourself progress and project a world and reality that may not be literally true, but subjectively true in a way that you help yourself progress in life and to better yourself. We do it all the time. The atheist naturalist like me, but far more strict and is anti-theistic or anti-religious, catches themselves getting into fiction and things like that. And it's like, hold on, man, what are you doing?
That's what I'm saying.
Right. So let's not be haters of the opposite side.
Yeah.
At the same time, I do want people to try and look at reality more so, because there are some fundamentalists. I think that it is harmful in some respects in the ways that I came from. The whole world, you're dividing yourself. There's only one faith through Jesus Christ. No one can get to the Father. You don't believe like me. You're going to hell. Like, I'm tired of that stuff. I must admit that's harmful in my opinion. And I'm not saying I'm against them, but that ideology is not something I favor. And I do try my best to poke at it here on this show. So I'm not against people who think there's something going on, or they're spiritual, or they have a belief in a divine power or something. And then also the atheist, I want them to kind of understand that you're not suggesting there is a supernatural being. You're saying, look in the mirror, my friend, and
Exactly.
you are that being. And so there's something powerful in that. I really appreciate that, Bernie. I had to spell that out for our audience though, so they don't think you're coming off with some nutty idea, if you will. Even though you're not coming across trying to sell a religion here, if you know what I mean. You're not trying to say there's something you must believe in that's beyond naturalism and the human psyche. Because I think Jung had a similar thing. Now, he was a little more spiritual in some respects, but he had a synchronicity and things like this that was really interesting.
He had a few ideas. Okay. And so,
Yeah.
and so that's why I don't consider myself
Sorry.
like a pure Jungian.
Right.
But I do believe today I'm here to promote the Church of Derek Lambert and the true faith and all that sort of stuff. Okay. Now you said that you didn't go to hell, or you're not going to go to hell, or that sort of stuff. The fact is that you have been to hell.
Right.
Through your experience, you went to hell, and you faced yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
In the now deceased you come face the mirror was the Michael Jackson. Okay. He sings a song. It's a brilliant song. And we're not big on Michael Jackson these days, but
Man in the mirror.
The man in the mirror. It's that is when you come to face your hell. And I had that experience. I had a similar experience to yours, but not through drugs that I took. But I had a major injury, sciatic pain on both sides. And I literally thought I was going to die. And I'm alone. And I went into like a Shavasana yoga state. I mean, the corpse pose where you don't feel your body connected to anything, like on the bed, in my case, you become weightlessness. So I had that actual experience, and my vision changed. And I was trying to. This was about 5-6 years ago. I was working on this book project, and I had these cave images in front of me, and my vision changed such that things that I couldn't see before became completely clear, but I had the wrong glasses on. I had my distance glasses on. So everything should have been blurry, but it became clear, which demonstrated to me in my mind, first, that vision is partly, it's chemical in your head. Okay, there's something about that. Your vision can be corrected chemically, because this is what actually happened. And it lasts for about 4 days, that everything was completely clear, that I didn't need glasses for absolutely anything. But then it changed. I went back to my normal, back to my glasses. But more importantly, another thing happened, is that I had that, I heard the voice. I heard that voice that spoke to me about my deepest fear. And my deepest fear was I was out of a divorce. I have a daughter who's in high school. What's going to happen to my daughter? And I was the primary parent. And she's in college now. I'm probably still the primary parent. But anyway, my deepest fear came to me, and I presented myself, and I answered it myself out of the middle of nowhere, said that I'm going to be okay, and she's going to be okay. And whatever happens to me, she will be just great. Things will go well for her life, despite everything I've done as a parent or whatever, and society has done. And so I let go at that moment, my deepest fear. Okay. And the voice came from inside me. Okay. Mm-hmm. So St. Paul, that wrote to Damascus, it said that he heard the voice from, and he saw the light. Oh, by the way, I saw the light too. Okay. But the light wasn't out there. The light was in here. Okay. And that's the light we hear about did you have the light, by the way, in your experience? in your head?
I don't recall seeing a bright
You
light.
know it. You know it because the
Yeah.
light then affects the vision. You'd know it. So when you hear these stories of people having the light inside them, this little light of mine, all that sort of stuff, they're not talking about, praying in church or, a heroin trip. The source of that is there is actually an internal light, which is people believe to be spiritual, but it's not. It's physiochemical, and it helps us to survive. It resets us. The pain goes away. In my case, the sciatic nerve pain stopped for a few hours. So the body, to prevent stroke and us dying, there's a mechanism that puts us on reset. Okay? And that reset is what helps us survive in the most tragic situations. Otherwise, people are dying all the time. And that situation is I believe is the same that St. Paul, the road to Damascus. And you can go throughout history. People have these experiences, and most of them become prophets. And I'm not a prophet, okay? And I never want to be a prophet. No one should call me a prophet. Only Derek Lambert should be called a prophet. But the new prophet. But it is a physical chemical response. It doesn't come from out there. It comes from within here. It resets your system. But that throughout history, this has been called you're talking to God and God saves you, all that sort of stuff. Someone very famous on modern times had this experience, and she tells a story. It's Jane Goodall, the primatologist, and she was married. She was married a few times, and her husband dies of cancer, and they tried everything possible to solve this. He was the love of her life. He dies in a very tragic death. Cancer itself, and she's in huge despair. She goes back to the forest to work with chimpanzees. And one day it's raining, and she follows the chimpanzees into the cover, and the rain stops, and a light comes out, and light comes through the sky. And she said in her mind she could understand the language of the birds, and the insects had a voice that spoke to her. And in her mind, she said that she could understand the chimpanzees from the perspective of the chimpanzees, from another animal being. Mm-hmm. And if you look at Jane Goodall, since that moment, she has the glow. She had that same spiritual, she believes it's a spiritual experience. If I would, we can use that word. It's okay. We just can't say it's a spirit from God. So I'm not sure.
It's an experience that's subjective to that person that we know they experience. I mean, I'm not, just because I don't believe in a God, and just because I'm a naturalist, and I think there's probably a natural explanation for almost anything and everything, even though I'm open-minded to the possibility, I'm just not convinced, does not mean that people don't experience things. So I need to put that there for anyone who understands that you can call it a hallucination or whatever. Sure, go for it. You could say that's a chemical reaction. I would agree with you. That doesn't mean that it wasn't important and necessary. Just like I'm going to probably hallucinate when I really go to die. When I really go to die, my brain is going to try and protect me. It's going to probably open the pineal gland, send out dimethyltryptamine. I'm going to experience chemicals that are going to flood and rush my head to protect me from whatever's experience I'm going through. And I'm going to enter a place, hopefully a good one, who knows, in terms of that experience, to protect me when I'm dying. Is that a lie? No, but it is subjective. It doesn't mean it's true universally across the board. You must believe my experience is true, or I talk to animals, or I know the language of birds, and I know the language of bugs. She experienced something. And oftentimes when we can't understand it, we attribute it to the divine. And that's because we don't understand it. And maybe we're learning more in the sciences we have today to understand this is something in the human psyche. This is something we as humans experience. And I think we're closer to understanding what that is, instead of having to say, oh, it was Krishna, or it was Jesus. It was, we are coming closer to try and really understand what this is, but it doesn't mean you should discredit the experience itself. I just want to try and understand more what's going on in a natural, and how can we explain this, right? Are we going to keep throwing it out to, well, Krishna really did that, or Jesus really came to me? I'm not saying that at all,
Correct. And in Jung's case, it was Philemon, the angelic character. Yeah. So it's an interesting phenomenon that we perceive it differently today than people did in ancient times. In ancient times, when most of these stories were written, they were herders. They were sheep herders, right? I mean,
Right.
that was it. And that is nothing to take nothing away from sheep herders. Okay. But that is the science of the sheep herder. Now back to you just said something that you went down a road of what happens to you in the end. And this is my perspective. Okay. Whether you believe that your eternity someone's not you, but someone's a theist, and their eternity is that they're going to sing and dance with the angels, or you believe that your eternity is that you're going to see your children and hug your wife and see your who's your living wife, or your friends and being in the bar partying over a winning game of the Portland Timbers or something. That's your eternity, whether it's 5 seconds or gazillion years. So I believe that people should have established their eternity statement. And because what you don't want to have as your eternity is that, I was beaten as a child, or, I was bullied as an adult, or whatever the story is. Okay. That's not what you want to go with you in the end. Whatever your end is, you want to go with what makes you happy, because you want your end to be happy.
Right.
And so when you face that final moment, and most people, they just don't just die, right? These days, people have some period that they go off into there's a period, it could be seconds, it could be minutes, it could be hours, it could be days, that they know the end is there. Okay. And I actually thought the end was there for me. But establish your statement, whether it be, dance with the angels, or, being smiling children, laughing children, that people need to decide that before. And it makes no difference if you're an atheist or a theist, because how you decide what your existence is, and make the final minutes or hours or days of your existence the best they possibly could be, regardless of what pain you're in. But think about, you don't want to die with, concept of, you're getting hit by a car and you're laying in the hospital. Then you're in pain and people are crying around you. You want to die with the idea that, you're in an environment of your choosing. And so it's right now you have more, your listeners raising their hands and screaming and pulling at their hair and saying, hey, this guy's kind of pushed one over on us. Absolutely not. Choose your vision statement. Now, going back in time, we talked about hell. Where does hell come from? That's a pretty important concept.
Yeah.
Because in the Paleolithic tradition, the hero, we can see the whole story through the cave images, where he comes, where he goes, and all this sort of stuff. And he never actually goes to hell. I'm going to tell you that. He never goes to hell. He transforms psychologically through the animals to help him take him to another place on his hero's journey. That's what he does. He never goes to hell. And we find these same images, the same story, recast in ancient traditions. So this story that I'm telling you, the Paleolithic tradition, is the story of Hercules, okay? His labors. In the final labor of Hercules, he goes to Hades, the underworld, and he has to retrieve the Cerberus, the three-headed monster, three-headed dog, okay? And very interesting, when he goes into Hades, he sees his children, the children that he had himself slayed.
Yep.
In a drunken stupor. And that's part of the myth.
Because of another god, but yeah.
And so he sees his children, and he doesn't say, I'm sorry that they're cast in hell. He says, I'm looking forward to see you here when my time comes, when I return. So in the tradition, as Hercules saw it, which goes back to the Upper Paleolithic, it's not about going to hell. It's about going to another place, another dimension. Okay. And he goes and he captures the Cerberus, which is never allowed to leave Hades. And the Cerberus, he takes it to frighten his cousin uncle, who's been sending on these journeys that are really supposed to kill him along the way. But through these journeys, he really learns about himself and how he can be a better person. But the Hades, of course, is the brother of Zeus and Poseidon. And they're in three realms. There's the sky realm, there's the terrestrial, the sea realm, and there's the underworld. And when we look at the Paleolithic, these caves, we find the same animals in the same places as they are in the terrestrial world. So we have a map. Okay, we have in the north part of the panel, or to the right side of this El Castillo cave panel, we have the Spanish animals in the Iberian Peninsula. The ones in the middle are marine animals, and the ones to the viewer's left are African animals. So he travels across time and space in this whole thing. Okay, important concept. And this is all below ground, the cave. So there's three realms. Okay, there's the realm at the terrestrial world that you have, that is a mirror of what goes below the ground. But there's also the third realm, which is the constellations. All these animals, Hercules of the constellation, all these animals as he interacts with on his journey are in the night skies, the constellations that help guide him on his way. So the man to the far right is Hercules. The constellation next to him is Agila, the eagle. Then you have Pegasus, the horse. You go down you have a dolphin, which became Pisces. At the far end, you have Orion, and next to Orion, you have Canis Major, the Sirius, the dog star. You go around the whole panel, you find all the Greek constellations. So you have three realms. You have the terrestrial realm, you have the underworld, and you have the sky world. Okay, none of those are actually hell. None of those. They are all part of the physical experience that exists. And in the Hermetic tradition, no, I'm not Hermetic, okay? But in the Hermetic tradition, you have as above, so below. How many realms are there if there's as above, so below?
I mean, technically, I've always thought of it as terrestrial and celestial, but there's an interesting thing. I have to make a comment. It could be what you're saying, all three below. Yeah. Terrestrial and celestial, because I had a recent friend, and this might tie into this, you might find this interesting. I'm not trying to rabbit trail, but I think this is important. He does research on the flood, and he mentioned how in Egypt, when they dug down in these quarries to build the pyramids, they found lots of sand dollars in the ground. And in the king's tomb in the Great Pyramid, there is stars, 5-pointed stars on the ceiling. They're exactly in the shape of a sand dollar, which was discovered in the quarries down below. So it makes me wonder if there's these three layers you're talking about, as above, so below, as if like the heavens reflect the underworld and everything in between is kind of in this thing. I don't know if that's what you're getting at, but I think
well, you're actually on the track. Yeah. And after the age of the pyramids, they went to the Valley of the Tombs. In the Valley of Tombs, they dug the tombs into a mountain. Okay. So they created caves. And so you have the below, you have the terrestrial world, and you have the sky world. So the as above, so below. To have something above you and to have something below you requires there to be three realms.
Right.
Now, in the Hermetic people, astrologers and those sorts, they talk about, well, the earth is the same as the sky. Well, that's not what as above, so below means. It doesn't mean that. It means there's three. Right. And so they're forgetting that there is, or they don't recognize, or whatever, that there is this underworld, this cave world, which is the land of the dead. Now, in the ancient Israelite tradition, the Sheol was their land of the dead. Okay, and it wasn't a bad place; it was just a dark place. It's where you get buried to, because that's just what they did. People got buried. It wasn't until we got into the New Testament that we actually find a fiery, horrible death. Okay. And one of the early ones was Matthew 6:10, on earth as it is in heaven. But more importantly is Luke 16, where the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. And the rich man goes to the fiery hell, the flames of Hades, and the Lazarus is taken away by angels to heaven. Okay, this is really the first accounting of heaven and hell. There's two different places that are good and bad. Whereas in the Paleolithic tradition, and I would say in Hermetics too, that the three realms were in fact the same realms. Okay, they were the same place, and they were all. It was a mirror up and a mirror down. So this idea of that people are going to a hell in another place doesn't exist. It was made up.
Right.
It wasn't made up by the ancient Israelites. It was made up by whoever Matthew and Luke sourced from, right? Actually, not Matthew, whoever sourced allegedly Matthew and Luke's work, right? So that people wrote their stuff after their time. So it's not true. In fact, it's actually a mistake. It's a historical, anthropological, cultural mistake that the hell and heaven are these good and bad places.
I want to throw an idea out there just to get your thoughts. Dr. Robert.m.Price that I have on, he believes that there is a connection, because I know that Bart Ehrman believes an annihilation view might fit the New Testament, but Dr. Price says he thinks that Zoroastrian origins found their way into this kind of tradition because the first Zoroastrian would be Persian, and the Pharisees, the term for Pharisee is Parsi, and some say that's the Persian. Sure. So the Persian Jews may have used their kind of connotation because in their afterlife, or they have some type of mythos that when people die, the righteous will bathe in the hot fire or in the liquid fire as if it's like just warm milk, but the unrighteous will be in suffering torment in that fire. So I don't know if that might be a source that's there, but I do know the church, from what I understand, I've even seen ex-priests, or they seem to be active duty priests, that said the church used this to control people because they wanted to frighten them and such. And
of course it is. It's all about the money. Follow the money. Now, interesting, you brought in, so Zoroastrian, we're really talking about, the greater Iraq area. They had angels too. Okay.
Right.
Ishtar and Ishtar was actually female, but there was a second one as well. And so this idea of angels that are intermediaries to the divine, it's all in the same mix. These are the same people. Interesting. There was so I'm in Portland, Oregon. I'm just outside of Portland, Oregon, and I saw in the news the other day that there was an exorcism by the Catholic. They weren't priests. I believe they were bishops, and they were in both Seattle and San Francisco. And the exorcism was to get rid of the bad, juju related to the, Black Lives Matter. I mean, on the side of Black Lives Matter, right? Okay. The bad juju related to Black Lives Matter and all this sort of stuff. So they literally exorcised 2 cities, Seattle and San Francisco. And people can Google it; they can find online.
What?
It's out there. I started Oregon Live, which is the Oregonian for here at Portland, and so people do still do this stuff. And the ritual was it was a Latin, they did in Latin, okay, but it was an exorcism. It was an exorcism. That's what it was. They exorcised the dead spirits. That is absolutely no difference than the Siberian shamans who travel to the world of the dead to ask for help from the prophets.
Right.
There's no difference. Okay. The difference is that in the Catholicism, they believe that there's a one God. Okay, there's a one God. But in all these other traditions, there's no one God. It doesn't exist. Even in ancient Egypt, there's only a short period of time that they had one God. In the record, there were many gods, and you had the Aeneid, which were all these animal, like horse, all these people, animal beings. So it was a transition period between the cavemen, upper Paleolithic, through to, let's say, the ancient Greeks, because in the ancient Egyptians, their gods were all half men, half other animal beings. Okay.
Wouldn't you agree though, the exorcisms, I can get someone praying over a house, right? There was a woman that part of the cult that I was in at one point. She used to come over and anoint the house and try and cast out spirits from our house. And she would see, and my mom had angel figurines, and she was like, "Oh no, those are spirit things. You need to get rid of them," right? Like just overboard, in my opinion. But anyway, she was doing all this stuff. And wouldn't you agree though that like exorcisms on that kind of level with that kind of mentality can be harmful? Because here you have someone with schizophrenia, let's say, they need medical assistance, and you think you're going to cast an evil actual spirit. So you're really not taking consideration this person might have mental health problems, probably play a role. What are your thoughts on that kind of stuff?
Okay, that's a good question. I'm going to tell you, this is a true story, okay?
Okay.
It's an absolutely true story. And most people say this can't be true. I met this guy a few years ago. It was probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And he was in the business of exorcising detached spirits. Okay, this is what he did. This is what he did for a living. He was an electrical engineer during his life, and then he went to hypnotism school, and then he went into this line of work. And most of the people that interact online. This is long before COVID, and most of the people that came to him, they had chairs turned over in the house, tables upside down, wrecked in the kitchen, and the whole story that poltergeist or stuff.
Right.
But the other thing, that the commonality between all of them, is that where they found that detached spirit, in a bar. They found the detached spirit in a bar. These people are alcoholics. Okay. They're alcoholics. And so they found the detached spirit in the bar. Bro, and they took it home, which wrecked the house. Right. Now, all these people, before they get to this guy, they've been to doctors. And the doctors can't help these people because they won't admit they're alcoholics. They believe they're detached spirits. And you can't go down the road of AA until you've gotten rid of the idea of the detached spirits, okay? The poltergeist in your house. So what he does is he tells them that he believes they are detached, they are spirits that are haunting them. Mm-hmm. And that and by the way, these people, they go to the bar, they can see the detached spirits in the stool next to them. This is like
wow.
Attached spirits. The spirits are attached to them. Okay.
Right.
They're really their own demons, no really different, or their own angels in the case of Carl Jung with his film on, right? It was his angel. Same sort of thing. So I asked him, I said, do you really believe in this? And he said, yes.
The guy who does the exorcisms believes it.
The guy who does the exorcisms, but the guy who's also a trained hypnotist.
Right.
He said, yes, because if anybody thought that I didn't believe it, they couldn't be treated.
Huh.
Interesting, so, right?
There's an interesting, I must tell you an interesting parable, if you will, on this that I thought was interesting. Have you heard of the wise man and the rooster?
No.
So give you a summation. A king's son goes batshit crazy. He literally loses his senses. And the king needs someone who's got wisdom, who can, cure or do something to help his son. He's got a lot of money. And so he comes in, he says, I'll pay you anything to help me get your son, get my son back to sanity. He's insane. So the wise man says, okay, well, you need to work with me. All right. You need to really, really trust me. Okay. So he says, okay, I will. And so the son is like a clucking rooster, and he's running around the house acting like a rooster, literally butt naked underneath the kitchen table, just doesn't want to move. And he's a rooster. So the wise man one day just takes his clothes off, goes underneath and starts clucking with him for a while. He starts to become like this insane person, clucking like the rooster. And finally, one day, after days of being naked and clucking and acting like he is just like the insane person, they offer some food or something. I can't remember the order of this, but anyway, he ends up saying, sure. And he puts some clothes on or something because it was cold. And the guy goes, what are you doing? You're a rooster. He goes, hey, just because I'm a rooster doesn't mean I can't put a little bit of clothes on, And so does the insane man. He just, he's got a point. It's a little chilly. I think I'll put the clothes on. So then the next thing, and they bring apples and fruit and food in, and he goes, hey, we're roosters. We don't eat fruit. And he goes, just because I'm a rooster. And anyway, the point of the story is every level at which he became what the person was, just to psychologically bring the person out. That's the moral of the story. And so I tell drug addicts that I help who struggle with addiction, I am you. I came from where you are. I know what it's like. I do the same thing for fundamentalist Christians. I totally understand. It is my opinion. If you wanted to cut to the chase, what do you think, Derek? I honestly think it's psychological. I think it's natural. I think there's some chemical imbalance. I do think there's something there. I'm an alcoholic, recovering alcoholic as well. I couldn't stop drinking alcohol. Drug addiction is just something my whole family runs through. My father, alcoholic. My sister was a meth addict. My brother's been on every drug under the sun, and he's 7 months clean right now. Like, we've all dealt with these type of things. And there's all sorts of issues that run on both sides of the family.
You lived in Eastern Washington.
Eastern Washington at some point.
What else is there to do?
I mean, well, that's a good point.
Out of deer and elk season, what else is there to do?
I wasn't using there. I was actually using in North Carolina.
Okay.
So, but I just say that to say, like, been there. And so if I were to explain what I think it is, I think there's an easy, natural explanation. But I think that there can be harm also if we think there's just a spiritual explanation. Like recently, there's a gentleman who was interviewing a Catholic priest on exorcising spirits. What if it's not? What if this guy really is suffering with a real mental illness and he thinks, well, no, I can come and exorcise it. I guess they have filters to try and see if it's a mental health issue. I don't know.
You mean the priest has a filter?
Like they have ways of trying to filter out if this is a
They
mental
could
health
give
issue.
a rat's ass. It doesn't matter for them if the person, it's because all things can be resolved through God.
Yeah, see, that's
it's like the pedophile priest. You know, it went for it. There was a special on HBO, and I can't remember what it was. It came out about 2 years ago, and they went through the history of the pedophile priest. And there's a period of time, it was years, that they sent all the pedophile priest to an island. Therefore, they knew about the pedophile priest. It was a worldwide knowledge up to the Pope. Okay, and a few days after, it was like within 4 days after that HBO special came out, the previous Pope resigned. Okay. So it was tied to that, and they sent them to the island to be to refine God or something. And that for a certain amount of time, then they sent them back into where they, to new parishes. Okay. And so the concept that they have, a filter to send the next person on to be the schizophrenia is absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
And as evidenced through the pedophile priest saga, is all things can be answered through God, through the intermediary of the priest or the, praying to the prophets, basically the dead shaman, right? Okay.
Right.
And so who then actually dead shaman who speak to the great Almighty. Okay.
Depending on the tradition, right?
Depending on the tradition, yeah, dude. So how did I end up talking to this guy who's a hypnotist? By the way, you're doing the same thing. You do the same thing that he's doing. Okay.
Okay.
You are a true believer, and that you're being a true believer. They believe in you. Okay?
Right.
That's what it is. So AA is based on the same principle. So I was an organizer for a mountain bike meetup group. A meetup is a social organization network sort of thing. I had many hundreds of members in my group. One day it was raining. Rides were called off, and I was like, "What the heck am I going to do?" So I found this guy. As it wasn't announced as what I expressed it as. I explained it was something else. I was the only one that showed up for this other meetup, and so I asked the guy, "Well, what do you do?" So instead of talking about what the meetup was supposed to be about, we talked about this concept. But he was a true believer. And as I said, it only works if you believe. So the priests and the clerics around the world, they can't influence their followers unless they are true believers, because it doesn't work. Okay. We're not getting to Trump. Donald Trump is a true believer. That's why he has all those millions of people following him. And I'm not saying it's good or bad about Donald Trump. I'm saying he's a true believer, because otherwise he can't tell his story. And whether or not the politician whether the story is true or not, it's what they believe to be true. And so when people go riffing off and all this sort of stuff, it's coming out of their personal unconscious. It is their truth.
That's what I was going to say. Like when you say I'm a believer, this is no ontological sense of a spirit or beings and things like that. I'm a firm believer I'm on the right path in terms of the mythology stuff that I'm delving into, and a naturalistic explanation. Being you're a naturalist, you know exactly what I'm saying. I think there's a natural explanation to all these things, even though our experience can seem supernatural. Oftentimes I think there are natural explanations, but or I think there probably is one for everything. We just may not understand all of them. Also, the other thing I was going to say is, as an drug addict, I know from experience, like the belief of knowing that I was insane. I couldn't stop using drugs. Even when I said I was going to stop, I couldn't stop drinking alcohol. I'd wake up and forget the night before and not know how I even began to drink, like just missing parts of my memory from the insanity. I know exactly what that's like. So people who listen to me, they can believe in me because they know from my words, from my experience, that I truly have experienced the things that they're saying. And the same goes for the Christian worldview. Everything that I experienced as a Christian, the emotions, all those things, I really can go there and relive them for them to know they can trust me and believe in me and what I'm saying, to consider what I'm saying, and maybe like the rooster, follow me in the path out of that. And so anyway, I don't want anyone to think that when you say I'm a believer, that they think that this is some woo-woo strange thing. But in the sense that I just described it, 100%. I'm very careful though when I just like lump me in. I'm no different than the fundamentalist Christian down the road in the way that they think. I do think that this is the proper way of going about things. I think we're leaving some of the superstition in a way that can be harmful. We're trying to progress, still using the same mechanisms we have, our brains, our experiences that we have, but trying to funnel them in a proper way, I think, is better. I mean, that's
absolutely. Well, I'm not sure if proper way, but really a different way. So we've moved. So the atheist has moved from the angels to Harry Potter. Okay. Okay. So we immerse ourselves in popular media so as to find another distraction, to find another, an opioid of the Harry Potter is an opioid of the people. I'm gonna tell you, it just is. Okay. Great and that movie. Is not a bad thing. Okay.
Right.
It's not a bad thing. It is escape from the normal. And that escape from the normal has been through myths I can show 34,000 years ago, the same myths that the ancient Greeks tell and that we have today. So we need those myths. We need those stories. And the question then becomes, who's in charge? Who has the power over those stories? That's what this is really, it becomes about. So if the Catholic tradition, the Catholics, major international force, their myth brings them money and brings them power. I mean, indisputable. Catholics will, the Pope will agree the same thing. He'll just say, well, it's all good. We give money to the poor too, and we help this and that, and all this sort of stuff. But bottom line, it's about power. It's about influence, but they have to keep those myths to keep the power and influence. Otherwise, people wouldn't follow them. And we believed in myths for forever, and it's so important because if we didn't have the myths, we'd be just like chimpanzees. Because the myths help us to join together towards a common goal. We may not like the common goal, you and I, but it is the common goal that has brought us forward over hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. Okay, the belief in that the shamanic birdman in these caves goes to the underworld, the land of dead, and brings back information, takes a spiritual journey, was of value in that time because it brought people around a common goal. Okay. And that they were all afraid of the shaman. They all followed his teachings. They all followed his direction. And his direction just wasn't that he went on this journey, but his journey was, he was a timekeeper. He said, this is when we go fishing. This is when we go hunting. This is your job. That's their job. All the direction of the tribe came through these shamanic leaders. And so we wouldn't exist today without their influence. I mean, it was a dark road, okay? Because who knows what all the horrible, nasty things happened during that time period, which they probably had their own inquisitions. Gruesome things probably happened to people. We have no record of it, but let's face it, when there's power, there's control, people get killed, okay? It's a thing. And people are subjugated, but it was through the long term of that, over tens of thousands of years, that we developed common mythos, common psychology, that not only brought tribes together from these caves, but brought nations together and brought continents together. And of course, now we have the United Nations, which is its own myth, right? The myth is everybody gets to show up and vote, and we have no wars. Well, that's absolutely absurd because we know wars still happen and people don't keep to the rules. But the United Nations is a myth. It's an important myth that everybody has a seat at the table to give their voice, and people can, instead of lining up their troops on the border, they line up the diplomats in the big room, the assembly room. So, these myths are misused, often misused.
Right. That's what I'm trying to get.
But they keep us from fighting with our neighbors.
There's a unity that comes from mythology. And I guess what my goal is to try and formulate a myth where we know we're not believing in this fiction in the sense that people have that has caused such division. I get uniting, but maybe we need a new myth, a universal myth, a myth that isn't, you must believe in Jesus Christ to get to heaven. If not, you're outside of this circle, buddy. Get out of here. You're not my friend. You're dead. I'm gonna watch from my my post in heaven while you're tormented, which is ridiculous, which is the point of why you're bringing up heaven and hell and how the origins of hell it's not even a thing, the way that people.
It's not a thing. It's not a thing.
I like that. But I mean, like, we're all going to have, and when you say myth, I want to define that term for people. I think you're saying a story. It's
a story that we believe.
It's
unconsciously we believe, yes.
Right. You're not saying it in the same derogatory sense people use myth to say, oh, it means fiction and it's a lie and it's not true. You're saying it's a story, and you understand that story to be a subjective story that a lot of oftentimes you are believing that there may be an internalized explanation of some traveling as a human through life, or a journey, a hero's journey, as you described with Joseph Campbell originally. I want people to understand that, because you use the term myth a lot, and there's different ways people use it. I think that there's the myths becoming literal interpretations, and the hermeneutics that are used to like create these divisive religions and cults that separate people from their own family members at times. Oh, you don't believe like me, you can't even be part of my family. That's harmful. I want to rid the world of those type of things in some way by educating people, not to go out and forcefully tell people you can't worship things. I want them to be educated enough to realize, hey, that's not helpful. That's not good. I understand it unites those who believe upon the same key goal, and it might be helpful from the mindset in the cult that this is what unifies us, but it separates us from the rest of the world. When can we have a global myth like Harry Potter that we know isn't literally true, but can teach us the values of humanity on how to treat a human who's black, white, green, yellow, purple, blue, gay, straight, you name it, and love them for being them, and unite upon that myth, knowing that it's a story, but it's a uniting story that we don't literally get lost into the literalist explanation of. I'm sure no matter what, there's a saying, and I'm just going to throw a Christian one out there. If Jesus was here today, he healed two men. One was blind, and the other man was blind, but he healed him with mud. The other man, he healed him with no mud. He healed both of them. You'd have Muddites and anti-Muddites. It's just humanity to be divisive.
Correct.
We need a mythology, though, that unites us. And I love learning.
So says the prophet, Derek Lambert.
Join my cult. I respect what you're saying. I love this. I rabbit trailed you so hard off the path, but it's relevant. Everything you said was so relevant and beautiful. When I first interviewed you, I didn't know how to take you, right? I'm like, I'm reading, he's a naturalist. I didn't know how to interpret you. And to be honest, even this show helped spell it out for me that you're a human. You're not a know-it-all. You're not trying to say that everybody's wrong and everybody's right, or this is the right path. But I do appreciate what you bring. And I think everyone who's watching this show can read more that you're not close. You're not running around attacking people who do believe things either. I
think we're all crazy.
I think we are all crazy to some degree.
But we need the craziness. That's why we exist today. That's how we've gone for hundreds of thousands of years, and that we can do things, cooperate on projects, because we have to believe in things that aren't there.
Now,
democracy
define what you mean. Describe.
Democracy doesn't. So things that aren't there. Going back to the United Nations. The United Nations is an organization founded on the belief that everybody has a voice, everybody has a seat and a vote at the table. It's not true. It just totally isn't true. And that we'd have entirely, new world where everybody gets along, red, white, blue, whatever, green. And it's an absolute myth. Democracy today. Bernie Sanders and the Koch brothers have completely different views of democracy. The Koch brothers believe that every dollar is a vote. Bernie Sanders believes that every person has a vote. Okay. Well, in this election, what would happen? It was believed that Biden was going to totally clean up blue wave because he had the most money. That's what the polls were. That they factored it in. He had the most money, and it turned out this whole thing is pretty slim. Whoever. Okay, I'm gonna call it the election right now. Okay.
I'm not big. By the way, I'm apolitical on this channel.
Okay, so I'm gonna call it the election right now based on all the data and the polls and my analysis.
Okay,
it's Biden. Okay, now we can move on. But the concept is that we believed that all the force, all the money that went into the campaigns would matter, and that was our truth. And what we learned in the last few days is that it had nothing to do with the money, and that the Trump camp is still alive and well. And Biden has had has so far the largest number of Americans voting for him in history. And Trump has the second largest number of people voting for him in history. And the people who voted for either of those have completely different truths about America.
Right.
Okay? Completely different truths. And very similar to the Koch brothers versus the Bernie Sanders. And so these are myths that, as long as we all believe our truth, that it's all going to work out in the end, that our voice will be heard, and that if you're a Trump fan, it doesn't work out this year, he could run 4 years, or your senator is going to make it up the slack, or your assembly or your local politicians. If you believe that, you're like, okay, well, it's all going to work out because I'm still covered. But that's a myth. It's completely a myth, because it's something you're leading yourself to believe to work towards a common goal. So we have myths in today's world that we are right before us that are no different than the burning bush, people walking across water, or whatever the story was, that was left to us.
Wouldn't you specify the myth of antiquity? And maybe you interpret it differently than the way I've understood this to be understood, is that these myths in antiquity are of supernatural. They take it to a place that doesn't happen. Like, just one example, fish swallowing a human in the depths of the sea for 3 days and 3 nights. I understand.
By the way, that's also on the Pelican Cave image. That is
right.
Actually the man in the belly of the whale is in fact on an image.
And by the way, I'm not denying that this may have like a metaphor, allegorical interpretation. I'm 100% on board with seeing this as possibly a celestial sign. This might have some deeper meaning. My point is, people believe a real fish swallowed a man for 3 days and 3 nights. A guy literally rose from the dead after 3 days. That is a different mythology to me than saying, I believe my political stance. They're not invoking something beyond the natural in that kind of mythos. That's all I'm saying. Wouldn't you agree that those two different terms are understood differently?
So this is what I will say, is that they're both towards the same aim of bringing people together for a common goal.
Would you agree though with me? And I think that I would agree with you.
So by the way, I'm going to go with all those. Most of the biblical stories go to a much deeper root, and they were part of a shamanic tradition where people. He actually, in the image we can see the man is in the belly of the whale, but it never happened. No different than the man who overlaps with the dolphin to become a merman.
Right.
It's that they came up with stories both in prehistoric times, which they evolved and changed in ancient times, that were to keep a good story. You have to have a good story. And the goal is the same, is to have a common story, a common myth that people will follow. And if you...
The politics are doing the same thing today.
It's the same thing. Okay, it's the exact same thing.
I see what you're saying.
Whether it's supernatural or CNN versus Fox News, it's the same thing.
I get what you're saying. Okay.
We need it. Otherwise you'd be fighting with your neighbors every day. You wouldn't trust the bus driver that he's not going to ride off a cliff. You wouldn't trust the shopkeeper that you're going to get shortchanged every time.
I kind of needed the definition. That's all, because it was, I mean, like when
it's the same fundamental. We not only do we need to believe, but we have to believe, because if we don't believe, we'd be at war with each other all the time. Have you ever worked for a big company? Company, hundreds of big company, and in a big company, people they become believers, right? You don't stay with a big company unless you're a believer.
The company, right?
You don't stay in that company unless you're a believer, because you have to have a common mythos that we are doing the right thing. Because people in big companies often do the wrong thing. It just happens. Okay, people get fired for their own reasons, and everybody gangs up on them. To stay with the company, to keep the company line, to keep the company going, even though they knew damn well that person got fired for discrimination of one way or the other. I mean, it happens every second of every day. Okay, it's a thing.
Can I confess on air? I'm literally recording. I got to confess to you something.
Okay.
I lost my right to vote many years ago when I was in active addiction. I lost my right. eventually my record would be expunged and things will work out for me. I want to say that gave me time not only to deconvert out of the strict literalist, fundamentalist Christianity that I was in to the mythology and exploring these things with a much more open conscious, if you will, and aware of things I never would have, interpreting things in ways I never would have. And I say that to say, I have avoided politics on purpose because I personally feel it's so tribalistic to me. And it's so, to me, it feels like a mythology, like a religious system. And I have a distaste for it. I understand why both sides say what they say. I'm not educated in it. I don't know the ins and outs. I don't really get into it because there's so much division and split and hatred. The Trumpers hate the libtards, and the liberals hate the fanatical, and all the other derogatory terms. And it's so much, I cannot even find myself wanting to get involved into it. And
I'm with you. Yeah. But you use a key word. You said tribal.
Right.
So Portland, Oregon is a tribe. We are,
right.
we're it's called out in the news. Prior to, 4 days ago, it was called out every day in the news where you heard about Portland, Oregon. Okay. And we are a completely different tribe than people in Alabama. We accept that. Okay.
Right.
And so, but we all come together through our elections, come to a common tribe.
We should.
We should, to the United States. We should come to the United States of America. And we have alliances with Canada and Mexico through NAFTA. And that becomes another tribe. And then of course, the European, the EU is its own tribe, right? Japan, Korea have their own alliances with China and Thailand and so forth. All these different tribes. Our tribes all come together at the United Nations. Well, all those tribes aren't really real, but we believe themselves to be true. And we need those stories to have tribes so we don't, kill our neighbors, to believe that, the next person we see is going to murder us. We need these myths. We need these beliefs in what isn't real. Okay. Our currency isn't real. Okay. It isn't real. It's completely made. The U.S. government, made up $2-3 trillion this past spring. Okay. It's not real. Okay? It just isn't, but we have to believe it's real because otherwise we won't exchange money with people. Although, the only transactions would be, I trade my chicken for your cow's milk, right?
Right.
Okay. We have to believe in things, and we have to believe internationally that when we go to other countries that, I hand over $100 and I get a room in Barcelona. These are all belief systems, and they're all in our head. And that's who we are, and we can't escape from. And it's the same belief systems that, there's retribution. If you do a bad thing, you're going to go to hell. It's the same belief system. Or in a democracy, you're going to go to jail. Okay. The fact of the matter is, if you're white, you're not going to jail for a marijuana charge. Okay? In Oregon, you can smoke pot anyway; it doesn't matter.
Right.
But in other places, if you're black, you're going to go to jail. Okay, it's going to happen. Okay,
or
it might be for a night, but it's going to be in your record. Okay,
right. It can be. I don't know if that's strictly across the board. I have very close friends that are black that, but anyway, I see what you mean. Like,
so we have these myths, we have these beliefs, and they're fundamentally inconsistent. But we have to believe in something, otherwise it doesn't work. So there's no difference between someone going to jail for a drug charge or going to hell. There's retribution for what you did. Or let's maybe not drug, but let's say bank robbery, okay? Because you got a drug charge, you're going to go to hell anyway, sooner or later, some sort of internal hell. But no difference between going to hell for you're not doing 20 Hail Marys or robbing a bank. There's a consequence for your actions, and that's what we believe. And the problem happens when people don't have consequences for their actions. Okay. When people get away with willy-nilly stuff because they're in a place of power, and that's really what's going on in America today, and what's happened in other places around the world and in our own past. So we want there to be a hell, and we want that hell to be either in the hereafter, but most people would rather see it, some of it sent off to prison for what they've done.
Right. Most want the punishment here, but I think that's why an afterlife hell also is favored. Like you said, man, that guy lived a great life and he did so much bad. I hope he gets his punishment, and it's, well, it must happen. It's got to happen somewhere. Oh,
somewhere. Exactly. Yeah. I grew up in the New York metro area. I'm 56 now. And I grew up in the time of, I was not in New York City, but I grew up in the time of the mob. I mean, it was a real thing. And I went to a Franciscan school, and we used to talk about, should the mob bosses be able to pay their way to go into, to pay off a church, to go, have a funeral in church, which then sets them off into the good life. If in the last second they said, I'm sorry for my sins, and as in our generation, we were the children of the 60s, the children of people who matured in the 60s, and we're at the point that BS. We don't believe that. Not only do we believe that this person isn't going to be in the fiery hell, but we don't believe that the last second confession is going to work either.
Right.
So the world has changed a little bit for roughly right now 49% of the population. Okay. Actually 51% of the population today. But the fact of the matter is that we have common beliefs. We it's what we do, and we need it to exist. Otherwise, we'd just be killing each other. You were hesitant to probably bring me on the first time because what the hell is this guy talking about? There's been podcasts that they said, we're not so sure about you. We're not even going to try.
I wasn't hesitant to bring you on.
Okay.
Where's
this guy going?
I interview a lot of people that don't agree with me. Like recently I interviewed Michael Heiser. He's a Christian, but he's ancient linguistic and stuff. And I don't agree with his conclusions. I don't think we have the same ideological worldview, so to speak, on how we view things. But I cherish his information, his knowledge. And when I heard you, I wasn't sure. I couldn't put my finger on you. It's like, okay, you use language similar to what a person who believes and sounds like a believer in these supernatural things, but you're saying you're a naturalist and that you're looking for a natural explanation, that you're not into there's no like God, so to speak, in the literal sense, the way we interpret it as like a secret sky daddy who literally exists there. Like that.
The father.
Right. And so I just say that and I don't mean that disrespectful, but it did come out kind of that way. I didn't mean it like that, but it's like,
no, it's good. I'm good with sky daddy. I'm good with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't know how to put my finger on it. And I get why you think the way that you do, because it makes sense. What you're saying makes sense. I think there's dangers in believing in certain things too. That's what I want to educate people on, like how maybe there's good, useful ways of believing in things. And I'm trying to bring more critical thought, which is why I challenge and question everything I think, because some thoughts and beliefs aren't good. Go to the Ku Klux Klan rallies, and I listened to a recent interview on a channel called Soft White Underbelly. White man, literally, I'm from the South. My mom's from Florida. They're rednecks, right? The whole family's redneck. And I don't mean it in a derogatory sense. It is what it is. Y'all hear me? And mom and dad, they rock the rebel flag. But a lot of my friends, even in high school here in North Carolina, rock the rebel flag. They have no Ku Klux Klan affiliation. They're not racist. They're just really proud of the South. They don't realize maybe the implications of the flag and maybe some roots to it and stuff that might have racist tendencies. And so I just say that to say, this guy was at Walmart and he gets this guy, walks up with a pamphlet, hands him a piece of paper and says, listen, would you like to come find out what we're about? I'm proud of you for who you are and your skin color. And the guy's like, he made it seem like a cool party, but he was like, there's no reason for us to be ashamed to be white people. And so he's like, okay, well, that sounds like an interesting apologetic, because gosh, you got to be ashamed to be white in America today. A lot of people feel that way. So he goes to the rally and he finds out the guy's preaching from the Bible. And the guy preaching from the Bible is quoting Old Testament passages where God is calling the nation of Israel a holy nation, a separate nation, divorce your foreign wives, only stick to your own kind and stuff. And he reinterpreted this to imply on the white man, right, in this rally. And he made this mythos for all those who are the same skin color a believable attachment to a biblical God that made them all, but he literally became a Ku Klux Klan member. And now he's being interviewed for being a Ku Klux Klan member because he says, yes, I am Ku Klux Klan. And let me explain my heritage. Let me explain to you why. And I heard the truth from the word of God. And, you know, I know that I need to stay with my kind. That's a harmful mythos, in my opinion. It might have benefited him within, if we're going to be global, if we're going to try and break the chains of the constant division and try and find a way of making us, it's more complex than this, but simply try to make us less tribal, but a unified tribe. That kind of mythos is harmful, and those type of beliefs are harmful. So that's why I'm very critical. And I don't tell everyone, oh, you must be a naturalist. You cannot believe any divine beings out there, believe in a God or a source or something complex beyond us. No, I don't know if there is or isn't. I'm not convinced there is. I'm not against you if you do. I am trying to have us think what's best for us in the big picture. And Ku Klux Klan rallies, I understand. I just don't see that being good in the long run or in the big picture, unless you plan on annihilating everyone and only people who are left are white people. No. So I think you get what I'm trying to get at, man. I'm just a human who's.
So let me tell you a story. So the big picture, I lived in China for 4 years. It's during this time period of Tiananmen Square. I was in my early 20s, and I was working as a businessman, and I'm still a businessman, but I was working in China, and they had eliminated religion. Okay.
Right.
It didn't solve the problems. Okay. Because it was never about religion. It was about power. It was all about power. And so you had local people, if you were a Communist Party member at that time, you had a great job. I mean, and it was all typically through family connections. Now it's pretty much irrelevant because it's the religion is money. Okay. But so you can't get, if you take out the religion, you still have the power. And how power is part of the human experience, that we really need power to keep the flock in line. And in the absence of power, we have anarchy. Okay. In Portland, Oregon, right now, I'm going to tell you, and these days we still have, I'm not saying I'm pro or against Antifa. Okay. Because actually I know people in Antifa. Okay?
Right. I met
There's no goal. There is absolutely no goal in Antifa, okay? And you can do hashtag Antifa on this YouTube video, maybe. There is no goal. But, they know there's no goal. They don't want there to be goal. They want there to be, they want to shake it up, which, Trump calls anarchy. The singular goal is to shake it up without anything in sight. So they're all unhappy now that Biden's winning because Biden's not going to go their way. At least he's not going to support continue shaking the pot because he's a moderate. Okay? So as a concept in China, we still had power, even though we didn't have religion. The state became the religion, and everybody was whoever was the predominant leader in the state at the time. What he believed became the path forwards. And when I was there, there's Deng Xiaoping had died, and it was transferred over to, I can't remember who. But what was important was it was the first peaceful transfer of power in modern day Chinese history.
Wow.
They never had one. So people what's going to happen in the news and so on, and with Trump, and he's going to go thrown in prison. They're going to walk out of the White House. Well, until that time in China, they had gone through successive premiers that they had. Everyone was a mini revolution. Okay. So because they had each president premier had their own mythos and their own story, their own religion. And instead of there being a common religion, where if they had a common religion, I'm not saying Catholicism was the answer to China, but let's say they had their own cardinal and bishops and all that sort of stuff. And that controlled the mythos for the country, as it did in Argentina and as it did in many South American countries. If the religious mythos controlled it, they would have had a more peaceful transfer of power, because the religious leaders would have maintained the people and more consensus in the transfer. So it is
This is complex, by the way.
It is
but
complex, yeah, because it's about power. It's
Right.
about power and control without having everybody at their each other's throats.
Have you heard of Gabor Mate?
No,
Oh,
maybe not pronounced that way. Is
yeah.
that the way it's supposed to be
Maybe
pronounced?
Gabor Mate.
Okay, no.
He's a big Jungian philosophical guy who's an addiction specialist.
Okay.
But he has a TEDx talk. This is right in the vein of what you're talking about here. The power of addiction and the addiction of power, and how religious, there's a connection here with the whole religious mentality to power. And this is why, for example, he points out Stalin wasn't Russian. He points out Hitler wasn't German. He points out these phenomenally powerful men in history have these superiority complexes, or they have these issues like Napoleon wasn't very tall, but he was the biggest man, larger than life. There's an addiction to power, or there's power to the addiction. And it goes into this really complicated thing, but it's interesting you bring that out, because even if you strip it of religion, we still practice these fundamental religious, what we like it's almost like, oh, you got rid of the divine aspect, but you're still doing the very same things you were doing without the divine. So how do we steer that? How do we steer that as humans, since it's in our innate nature to act these ways? And that's where your mythos ideas come in, and you're starting to point out some of these things. And I'm trying to keep history from repeating itself if possible.
But we can't keep history from, because it's in human nature. There will always be bullies, and there will always be heroes to save us. There will always be damsels in distress. There will always be heroes on the journey. We will always have these archetypal characters because they are within us all. So we're re-experiencing the human experience, who we are, through our myths over and over and over again. We've been telling the same freaking stories for tens of thousands of years because we haven't changed within that story. And we will never change within that story because it's who we are. There will always be natural leaders, always be people who think critically, and always be followers. And you need the accountants who follow the laws, who do your paperwork. You need those people. If everybody was a Picasso, we'd be a pretty screwed up place because you wouldn't have the lights on, the water wouldn't run.
Right.
I'm as you recognize, I'm pretty far out there. Okay. Can you imagine if there were millions of Bernies out there, that each one was their own independent thought leader? We'd be a mess. Okay. Yeah. We can't have that. We have to have a mainstream. People, sometimes people criticize me. Well, is this a mainstream thought? Well, no, it's not. But I'm okay that it's not a mainstream thought, because the mainstream is sort of like like a aircraft carrier. It kind of turns slowly, right? It has to whip around an aircraft carrier. And so, as people add information to the mainstream discussion, the mainstream serves a little this way, a little bit that way, and that's healthy. Otherwise, we go back to what China had, is every time there's a transfer of power, there's a revolution. And there were actually many revolutions in China in modern times. And we talk about the cultural revolutions. There's actually many different. There was the counter-revolution first part. Then there was a counter revolutionary. Then there's the reactionaries, the counter revolution. I mean, they went back 10, 15 years of, children, ratting out on their parents because somebody else told them to do something that was never true in the first place, but they were following the faith. Their own witch trials. So it's who we are. We'll never escape from it. But what we do,
I hope we evolve out of it. Just
no, there's no evolution. No, ain't gonna happen. How we transform we transform forwards is that we come to accept that Harry Potter is not a true story. But we express ourselves through Harry Potter. We express ourselves through video games that we shoot each other up, or watch war movies that people shoot each other up, as opposed to people actually shooting each other up, or people believing that angels are coming and talking, whispering in their ears. Okay, so we're transforming through modern media to have to externalizing our individual and ultimately group psyche.
So you don't think we could evolve past this?
No, not at all. Not even a glitch. There is no evolution past this, because it is not only is it who we are, it's who we always have been, And we are because of this psyche. It is inevitable.
I want to hope you're wrong. I do.
Of course
I mean,
do.
I get it. I relate to the mythos. I relate to the hero archetype. I relate to the person who needs a hero. I relate to all these aspects. I think those will always carry on, and that it works itself in nature too. I mean, you watch the Discovery Channel, you could see animals act these ways too, but I hope we evolve and continue to evolve. And I'm optimistic and just saying that I hope, and this is a myth, okay, in my mind, that we can progress and somehow find a way to unite, even with our differences of opinions. But yeah, I just don't see it happening anytime soon. I'm just saying.
But it's okay, because what we do need is balance. We need balance and power. And whether you're Democrat or Republican is irrelevant, but Obama would not have become president if not for the failures of Bush Jr. Bottom line, okay? He was a total screw up. And even Republicans don't stand behind Bush Jr. anymore either, okay? And Trump is a reaction to Obama and the Clintons. And whether you like the Clintons, it's irrelevant. But Trump is a reaction to them. And now Biden is a reaction to Trump. Okay, people didn't go out to vote for Biden; they go out to vote against Trump. It's a reaction to them,
right?
And so we have a balance. We have a balance of power. The Democrats took over the House because of they believe the failures, generally the failures of the first 2 years of Trump, and too much power that people weren't putting him in check. That's why the Democrats took the House 2 years ago.
I have no clue about any of this, and I just
so it's about
that way.
it's about it's all reactions. It's about, so what we need for going forwards is the belief that our systems work and that everybody has a voice. We can all vote, and not just within the United States, but around the world. So in China now, they have very peaceful transfer of power, because they have elections the same way we do. Okay, that's why you haven't heard about major issues in China in 30, 40 years. So democracy, however we call it, that has a peaceful transfer of power is the answer. And when there isn't a peaceful transfer of power, the people will ultimately rise up and be supported by other countries that have democracies. So I believe democracy is the answer to all these problems and the separation of church and state. Okay, because once you have the church involved in the state, you can't push back on any abuses of people that are being supported by the churches.
Right.
Okay, you never have a democracy with a combined church and state. Will not happen. And so I think that the path forward is political. We're never going to change, but it's also cool about who we are. That we believe. We watch Harry Potter and the owl sends us messages, right? We watch Spider-Man, transform, get the strength of a spider, and Aquaman, the fish, or some sort of marine mammal. We believe we are taken in by these things. To tell us about ourselves. They tell us about the story of humanity, of human nature. And it's absolutely fascinating. And it's what makes us different from chimpanzees. They have all the same issues as chimpanzees. They have bullies, they have, damsel in distress, right. They have the nurturing mother and the child. They have all the same archetypal characters. The only difference is they fight among themselves, they kill each other, and they don't tell a story. They don't verbally tell a story. And they don't experience the greater part of life that we do. Maybe, they can understand what the insects are saying and the birds are talking, as Jane Goodall believed, but they lack what we lack. The human imagination, the mythological,
they lack
what we have.
Yeah.
And it is both our failing and our try is what causes us to fail and also causes us to triumph. And that is that is the nature of the human experience. You're never going to get rid of religions. You're never going to get rid of the opposite of religion, right? Fascists, right? Actually, secular fascists, right? Because you can have religious fascists. Secular fascists. You're never going to get rid of that. You always have reactions to those. And so if we keep the faith of a democracy and promoted around the world. However, it's, through capitalism, is usually how it's successful. We will continue to fail, but more importantly, we will triumph, and we won't blow ourselves up.
I hope not.
Yeah.
So, okay, this is great. I think we've covered quite a bit. We've talked about angels, winged creatures like birds, shamanistic, tribals. We went into politics, which is something I never do on this channel, but I felt like it was really fun because I'm not educated in this, but it was important to kind of talk about some of the beliefs and things that we experience as humans. We're always going to experience things. I think they're subjective, but they're true to all of us in some way. And we all have our own mythos. So I hope we can unite more as humans. But Bernie, thank you so much. What are your final words to people out there, and how can they help support what you do?
Go to my webpage, beforeorion.com. There's lots of videos. They range a lot of 2-minute videos. And there's a bunch of longer ones. And people get to see more about who we are and where we come from. I talk a lot about archetypes. Follow me I use Before Orion for all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, you name it. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, beforeorion.com, that's spelled out .com. And just be part of the scene and, listen, learn, and comment, especially. I love comments. And be who you are.
Awesome. Thank you for
joining. One more thing. Define your deaths, what are your last thoughts in your death? What are the final moments? Is it that you hate evangelicals? Is that you love your children? Because those are your final thoughts. That is your eternity, whether they're seconds or they're some biblical other reality.
Hopefully it's positive.
Well, make it positive.
Yeah, make it positive. Thank you so much for this. This has been an interesting discussion. I haven't had one of these in a while. And made me dig deep, made me think in a different way than I'm used to thinking, more non-analytical, so to speak, more internalizing in the psyche and such. So thank you so much. Tell me what you guys think about the show. I mean, let me know if you liked this. If you do, we'll do this again. I'd like to have Bernie come back on because he actually has presentations. He will show visuals and show you guys stuff. You can see a lot of pictures and images on the mythologies. And like we were talking about Joseph Campbell's work, The Hero's Journey, we can go into more stuff like that. I really enjoy those kind of conversations. With that being said, it's down in the description. You guys can click on all the links to help us out here at MythVision. You can help Bernie out, beforeorion.com. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, in case you have, look, we're human, I understand. We are MythVision.